Other studies, the University of Illinois looked at, and I think Howard Frumkin referred to this yesterday, did studies of children with the symptoms of attention deficit disorder and found that just a little bit of contact with nature, these were inner city kids, just a little bit of contact with nature, those symptoms got much better, even kids as young as 5 years old. The researchers, Francis Kuo and the others who did this, recommended that nature therapy be added to the other traditional therapies for attention deficit disorder, which are behavior modification and Ritalin and other stimulants. I agree with that, and as a journalist, I can be a little more provocative and get away with it than an academic. But I asked the question in Last Child in the Woods, you know, yes, it's a good thing to use nature therapy for attention difficulties, and we should do that. But could it be that at least some of the huge increase in the amount of Ritalin and other stimulants being prescribed, mainly in the United States, some schools, 30% of the boys are on Ritalin to control them? Could it be that at least some of that increase, not all, but some of it might have something to do with the fact that we took nature away from kids in the first place? Could it be that at least some of the huge increase in the amount of antidepressants that are being given to young children, really young children, might that have something to do with the fact that we took nature away from them in the first place? Could the suicide rate among teenagers have something to do with that because we've taken the meaning, much of the meaning of life away from them by taking them out of nature? Could that have something to do with it? Nature also helps people learn, helps kids learn. Again, I want to add here, though, that we, as Howard said yesterday, we need a lot more research, and as he and I often quote him as saying, we need more research, but we know enough to act. But we really do need more research. Some of the research on this issue is the methodology may be questioned by some. Some of it is in minor journals. There is not enough of it. Why isn't there enough of it? When I talk to pediatricians, and I've been asked to give the keynote in October to the American Academy of Pediatrics, and I'm going to challenge them with this because pediatricians will say to me, well, Rich, where's the 30-year longitudinal studies about how this makes kids healthy? And I said, where were you 30 years ago when you should have started them? You know, why haven't you? You know, I was talking to someone the other night, and perhaps yesterday, and I was thinking, look, Natural England is doing wonderful things along this line, connecting people to nature for their mental health, saying out loud that there is a limit to the amount of antidepressants we can hand out. I mean, they're not against antidepressants, they're just saying there's a limit, and that some of the activity that happens in nature may work just as well for some people as antidepressants. And why is it that Australia has this great report and is sponsoring this great meeting? And is thinking about, much more in the United States, about the connection of health to our experience of nature? I think it may have something to do with the fact that we're just getting around to anything that looks like national health insurance. You know, who funds the research in the United States? Is there a drug that can be sold? Is there a toy that can be manufactured for natural play? That's why in the United States I think we need to look to other countries more than we do on this issue. But in any case, the research, much of it correlative, not causal, is accumulating. It is pointing to advantages in terms of learning. In California, a study was done of 3 school districts that still had some kind of immersive experience in nature, like a 6th grade camp. The so-called at-risk kids in those schools did 26% better on science testing than they did in a regular classroom. Canadian studies have found that teachers benefit from this too. The teachers who get to take kids outdoors to learn. Those teachers don't burn out as early as teachers in schools that keep them huddled in the cubicle with the kids all day. Across the board, and this has been mentioned, of course, by others, but the impact of health on adults and children, people with a view of a natural area as opposed to a brick wall or a man-made area tend to get well faster in hospitals, and that's one of the reasons why you see healing gardens being introduced in many of the new hospitals. One of the issues that has not gotten, I don't think, any research is the whole issue of family bonding, and it should be researched. Marty Erickson, who, along with Howard Frumpkin, is on the board of the Children and Nature Network. She is one of the leading experts on, or has been one of the leading experts on attachment theory and child psychology. And attachment theory has to do with, in the very early period of a child's life, if they don't attach emotionally to a positive adult, they've got problems for the rest of their lives. So she has looked at this. She says research has not looked specifically at a link between outdoor experience and quality of parent-child attachment, and certainly parents can be sensitive and responsive to their babies and young children indoors or out. But in many ways, she says, the natural world seems to invite and facilitate a parent-child connection and sensitive interactions. I would ask, what better way to get away from the labels and the billboards and the electronics and all of the things that are competing for our time, that are dividing us as families, than to go for a walk in the park, go for a walk in the woods. Again, that's a question that should have been researched long ago. Study recently, University of Washington, Purdue, and University of Indiana, very interesting study, found that in terms of child obesity, the body mass index reading for children, there seemed to be a correlation between how green the neighborhood was and how good that reading was, how much of child obesity there was in that neighborhood. One of the most interesting things about that study is they said this was independent of population density. In other words, you can have a very dense neighborhood that is a lot greener, and you can have some effect on child obesity if this study is correct. In any case, I won't go into all the many of the other benefits, but there are just tremendous benefits from this, and we don't know enough. We're learning more. We need to talk about it more. Certainly in the argument for healthy parks and healthy people, that has to be part of the discussion. Let me say quickly, why is this happening? Why is what I call nature deficit disorder occurring? I can mainly talk about the United States. Has something to do with urban design. I mean, parents get preached at all the time to get their kids out from the television and get them outside. But, you know, where outside? Where are you going to walk in some of the neighborhoods in the United States? How are you going to how are you going to cross that freeway? Is there a store they can walk to? Is there a park within range? Not only that, but in many of the communities in the United States, and I think this is true in parts of Australia and in the suburbs and parts of many of your countries, and I assume it's true in China, where they are replicating the kind of housing developments that have dominated Southern California and Florida for a long time. Unfortunately, they're replicating that. Almost all housing built in the last 40 years in the United States is controlled by covenants and restrictions, CC&Rs. Private governments, essentially, called community associations, neighborhood associations, that have the kind of power over people's lives that Americans, allegedly, would never give to public government. They control the color of people's window liners. They control whether you can plant a rose bush in the front. You have to go before your community association board. There have been liens placed on condo dwellers for hanging American flags from their balconies because it's not in the CC&Rs. Just try to put up a basketball hoop in some of these neighborhoods, let alone let the kids build a treehouse or a fort. It's not going to happen. One woman told me that her community association had recently outlawed chalk drawing on the sidewalks, which leads to cocaine abuse, I think. I made that last part up. You know, and just when I think I've heard the most egregious example of this kind of mania for control in so many housing developments, I hear another one. In South Carolina, somebody told me that their community association had decided that there were too many flower pots in front of the houses, the townhouses. So they came up with the rule that you could only have 3 flower pots and they could only be 10 inches across in front of your house. You know, flower pots, the enemy within.